The outside world is a wasteland. Something happened. Something unexplained that turned the entire planet into a desolate place, filled with ruins and JRPG enemy fauna at every turn. Except for one city, a single city that managed to survive this catastrophe unscathed. The utopian place called Eden. Now it's up to you to figure out a way to get there, cutting your path through both monster and equally powerful human rivals in order to reach the last peaceful place on Earth. Will you succeed on your journey, or will you fall like everybody else? You better be careful, or you might just end up dying. One step from... Okay, this has gone far enough. It's Mega Man Battle Network as a roguelite. That's what this game is. Are you good with that? Okay then, let's move on. One Step from Eden, developed by Thomas Moon Kang and published by Humble Games, is my latest obsession. Now, if you know me, which you probably don't, but if you did, you'd know that I hate roguelites. I hate losing progress. My ideal kind of game are the games where you lose 30 seconds of progress at worst when you die, and roguelites run on the complete opposite direction of that, making you lose all of your progress when you die. But just like with Hades, once in a blue moon, a roguelite that I enjoy comes running along and I end up having a pretty good time, and that's the case with One Step from Eden. Now, if you know Mega Man Battle Network, then the gameplay should look very familiar. But for those of you not in the know, the main notable feature of the Mega Man spin-off series is that every battle takes place in a battlefield divided in a grid, with one half belonging to the player character and the other half belonging to the enemy character. What this means in practice is that the player can only move on his side of the grid and the enemies can also only move on their side, meaning they must rely on their weapons to hit their targets and also watch out for field altering moves that do things like set fire to a tile, damaging anyone who moves there, or maybe break tiles, which makes movement in that tile impossible for a while. One Step from Eden spices things up by providing a considerably larger grid and by being a roguelite. A normal run works like this: you select a character, and said character usually has a weapon that is always available, an artifact which provides passive bonuses, and a starting deck of 4 spells. Every time you cast a spell, that spell becomes unavailable until you spend all of your spells. Then your deck gets reshuffled and every spell goes back for another round. However, every time the deck is shuffled, they come back in a random order and you only get access to 2 spells at a time. So just because powerful spells are in your deck doesn't mean they will always be available for use at the best possible time. Complicating things further is that each spell requires a certain quantity of mana, a regenerating resource, to be cast, so you can't just spam your spells until a shuffle happens over and over. A normal run is also separated by battles. Win a battle and you get to pick from 3 possible spells to add to your deck. You also earn experience, and when you level up, you get to pick an artifact to earn more passive bonuses as well. You can also get artifacts from treasure chests and other special encounters, but most of the time you have to deal with selecting spells. You can also remove spells or upgrade them with extra effects if you have the necessary items, though rarely you can get spells with special effects preloaded into them as well. And of course, there are also boss battles, a shopkeeper that you can fight as an optional extra hard boss, and all of that general stuff roguelites are known for. Now, with the basic overview over, let's talk about what makes this game in particular a very good one. From the moment you start the game, you will notice its streamlined design in action. You'll be thrown straight into a bunch of menu options, and selecting to start a new run, for example, will throw you into a second screen where you'll be able to select everything you need to start a new run, from the character to their loadout, outfit, and if you wish to stack on additional challenges called hell passes on your current run, you'll also be able to do that. You'll be able to choose all of this in a single screen with a line indicating which step of the process you're on. It's simple, clean, and quick to pass through when you know what you're doing. this minimalist style continues into the game, you immediately start the run on the grid and you will never leave the grid. There are no complicated inventory screens to set up your deck, there are no multiple screens to navigate through the shop, there's absolutely nothing beyond the grid. Everything is done in there and you always have access to all of the information you need available on the screen, like money and current health, which are helpful when making decisions such as what spells or artifacts to keep or what items to buy, which is made even simpler since if you don't want any of them, you don't even have to navigate a menu. You can skip all of your current rewards with just a single button press. You also use the same buttons you use to cast spells to go back and forth doing menus, so with a few exceptions, you'll be pressing the same two keys for most of the game, a fact which reinforces what your hand position should be during the game to make both combat and shopping and menu selecting as smooth as it can be. In a world like our current gaming world, where streamlining is often seen as a stupid euphemism for dumbing games down, it's great to see games like One Step from Eden showing how they can be a great design choice while still keeping a ridiculous level of gameplay depth, which works wonders for a game where dying means restarting from zero, since you can quickly restart after each run before any feelings of frustration can set in. And when you have enough knowledge about what every spell and artifact is, you can quickly make decisions based on what kind of deck you're trying to build in this run with no downtime. This game is absolute streamlined perfection. As a quick side note, a fun little fact about this game is that you can pull the pause menu even when you're still in the main menu, which further reinforces that feeling that you are always in the game, which I thought was pretty cute. Assuming of course this isn't a bug that will be fixed on the next patch, but considering how long it has been and how many patches have been released so far, I sincerely doubt that. But it is possible. Yeah, hopefully it's not a bug, and I'm totally not a stupid YouTuber making things up, yeah. But going back to the grid system I mentioned before, it is also absolutely genius. The grid guarantees the delivery of great level design at every single point in the game because it never changes. A problem some roguelites might have is that their level design can sometimes be a tad iffy as a consequence of using level generators, especially if they end up generating every single block of the world individually instead of using pre-made rooms. One Step from Eden gracefully sidesteps this problem by making every single room the exact same. Now, if this was a traditional hack and slash type of game, that would have been pretty horrible, but given the grid-focused gameplay of Eden, it actually works fantastically. Because every battle takes place on the same grid, there is zero chance of you having to deal with badly generated level design, and to compensate for the lack of variation, the grid is also used to the fullest in gameplay. You can get spells that can break tiles in the grid, spells that set tiles on fire or set spikes in them, you can even place turrets that fire bullets or even better, lasers that press through all of the enemies in a row, and of course your enemies can do the same as well. And that's just based on spells. You can also have hazards like volcanoes that throw fire everywhere, you can have pre-broken tiles, you can have treasure chests that disappear with time, you can have hostages that you have to save and should try not to hit with your spells in order to get rewards. There is a lot that this game ends up doing with might be at first seem as just simple grid placement. The nature of the battlefield itself is constantly changing as the battle goes on. In a way, the things you and your enemy set up could be seen as changing the level design itself as the battle goes on, which is fantastic and gives you a great degree of freedom in approach on how to deal with the game's challenges. If you want to just fuel your deck with projectiles and forego the grid battling altogether, betting on hitting fast and hard rather than trying to ambush your opponent, you can do that. It helps that each tile on the grid represents a great potential change on the tides of battle. Sure, in other roguelites and games that you can set up traps, but you have to rely on choke points of the already pre-made level design and such for those to work. Eden, however, offers a limited number of tiles on its grids, so even breaking a few ones can greatly limit your enemy's next move, and you can change the entire grid into an ambush of your own that the enemy has no choice but to trigger. It is exhilarating, and there are few things quite like this out there. As a side note, there might actually be level design depending on what you count as level design, since, like I said before, some encounters are completely pre-made, like the ones involving hostages, where you, for example, have a turret aiming at a hostage that you must interrupt the shots of before they kill them, or my favorite ones, which are the ones where the hostage is in front of an exploding shard, and thus you must use spells that only hit after a certain number of tiles, since if you just fire straight projectiles, you kill the hostage. They are all tests against your current deck, and you will not pass them unless you have a sufficiently varied deck. Then again, if you vary your deck too much, it might end up being weak, so sometimes depending on the build you want to try, you just have to let them die. But hey, as a bonus, there is an artifact that makes you more powerful the more hostages you kill, so yay for more playstyles, even if they are incredibly bloodthirsty, I guess. And as a second side note, whenever an attack hits or is passing through a tile, the tile becomes a shade of yellow to indicate that you will get hit if you stay there, which is great to figure out enemy patterns and how to avoid them. If an attack is about to hit, however, the tile gets a red border with an exclamation point in it to indicate that an attack is incoming, which is equally helpful in figuring out patterns and how to dodge them, since all you have to do is not be on those tiles when the attack hits. Honestly, the grid-based combat of this game is just so fucking good. It's ridiculous it took this long before someone made this. There should have been about 10 Mega Man Battle Networks inspired games by now, yet all the ones I know is this one and the Toho one, like, what the fuck? But moving on to the next point, Eden has one of my favorite spells linked mechanic thingies in spades, and that is spell synergy. You see, spell synergy, and I hope that's the correct word, is basically when different spells can interact with each other in interesting ways, usually to the advantage of whoever mixes them up. And boy, can you mix up different spells in your deck. You can acquire artifacts that stack all sorts of negative effects on poison enemies, then deliberately pick as many poison spells as possible to keep stacking them on your foes, or you can pick up shield artifacts to generate as much shield as you can before firing off shield-based spells, and of course you can do the classic of every complex battle system that have status effects on them, where you can deliberately stack negative status effects on your character, then have that balanced off by having artifacts that give you power-ups the more status effects you are currently suffering from. Basically, the level of interactivity between spells and artifacts is pretty good, and only further exacerbated by the literal hundreds of spells currently in game. In terms of giving you a challenge though, the 1v1 against bosses are definitely the highlight. Despite the game being far from a walk in the park, I only ever die to bosses. Enemy encounters and choosing your path through the randomly generated world is a challenge, and if you don't pay attention, you will die. There is no true cakewalk part to this game, but they just pale in comparison to the absolutely cathartic duels that are waiting for you at the end of each area. In fact, the higher your skill level, the more you understand the areas as a series of waiting different choices where you have to take both your skill and the good old roguelite luck into account in order to build an arsenal and be as prepared as you can for the boss battles. And just like every single other aspect of the game, the bosses are amazing. They each have their own gimmicks and patterns, and you'll meet most of them every single run, which is a good thing, as you'll probably not have enough time to memorize all of their attacks the first time you encounter them, even if you do manage to survive the encounter. Though you do have to keep in mind that they hit harder, can take more damage, and change their patterns the further you are into the game, which is both a great way to add variety to each run and also an awesome way to get yourself screwed by meeting a boss you don't handle very well closer to the end game. You will meet many colorful characters on your journey, such as Shizu, the man with the gun that usually flies around pretty fast and fires out single powerful shots, but can and will fire a wide laser that forces a shuffle on your deck and jams it up as well. Or maybe you'll meet Hazel, the clever engineer who spams turrets and makes mazes out of boxes before resetting the field in one of the coolest boss moves in the history of gaming by summoning giant hydraulic presses from the sky to destroy everything, which includes her own turrets. But don't get too comfortable with that, since she can also summon giant crystals that fire lasers on your direction when destroyed, and the presses will destroy them just as well, so you'll have to dodge that as well. It's just such a well designed and complex boss move that I immediately fell in love with her. Hazel's the best, she's the best character. But of course, we shouldn't forget about Violet, who has the best theme in the entire game, which you are hearing right now. And the developers definitely agree with me because they also use the same song in their most recent trailer. It's just such a banger. The entire soundtrack is really, but this song in particular is also important in gameplay, since the main mechanic of violin fight is that you have to dance to the song's tune by moving around specific green tiles to charge up your shield so you can survive an unavoidable attack. Like I said, every boss is incredibly remarkable in both mechanics and in visual design, aided by their wonderful portraits in the character select screen, because yes, every single boss character, with the exception of the possible final bosses, are also playable characters, and every single power of theirs is available either as an inherent gimmick to the character or as a spell that any character can find during runs. Except for the hydraulic press, which I have yet to find that one, but if I do, then this game will be literally flawless. The only thing that I kept thinking about though, the thing that isn't related to this game's greatness, is how thin the story is. And this is not all bad, since, like I said, streamlining the experience is one of the game's greatest assets and one of the hardest tricks in the book to pull off, since that requires careful design of every single one of the game's mechanics so that they can easily flow into each other. But given how much time I've spent exploring the world and getting attached to the characters, it's a bit painful that there isn't much to the world itself, especially when we have all sorts of cool abilities and a literal time manipulating angel entity protecting one of the last known cities of the world, and all of that just begs for an explanation. Not helping the game's case at all in this particular instance is that all flavor text that you get from spells or artifacts, when there is flavor text at all, is all memes and puns, little jokes to make you smile, but don't expect any Dark Souls style item descriptions that could elaborate on the lore. There is nothing here but a single line of description for each character and a couple lines of dialogue for each boss battle, and that's it. You don't get to hang out with the bosses you become allies with in the peaceful camps, except for the ones that give their gameplay benefits during the camp segments. Like I said, gameplay is king here, but I don't think that's bad at all. Note how I said it's something I kept in mind during the experience, but not something I inherently disliked, and it didn't detract from it at all, because in the end, Eden would have lost much more than it gained if they'd thrown away all the work they put streamlining the rest of the game just to put in some cheesy cutscenes telling a story that the developers were not confident about, or hell, maybe they just didn't want to put effort into because they had better things to focus on, like the ridiculous amount of spells and possibilities the gameplay offers. And considering just how damn good this gameplay is, who could blame them? And of course, telling the developers to just make their characters generic and unlikable and design them badly so I wouldn't want to see more of them is just dumb. I would just be telling them to make their game shittier so I wouldn't want to know more about it, and fuck that, that's just a stupid train of thought. All I'm saying is, I would totally read a comic about these characters and their wacky wasteland adventures. So hey Thomas, if you're listening, maybe keep that in mind for the future, eh? It's a possibility. Now, as a final note to those of you considering buying this game and wondering how the recently added easy mode works because you think this game might be too hardcore for you, I'll tell ya. The easy mode is called Angel mode, and basically every time you die, the enemies do 2% less damage and move 2% slower, both capping at 50% total, which is just really cool since it will incentivize you to die during multiple runs just like the normal main gameplay loop, but it will give you a little boost each time and also addresses the complaint this game had since day one release that it is just too damn fucking fast. Because it really is. I'm not sure if it's too much, because being fast on normal mode is really good, and I honestly recommend everyone to just experience that pure madness. But yeah, it is kind of really fast. As for the hardcore gamers among the audience, the original gameplay is completely untouched, and you can even unlock and use hell passes to add difficulty modifiers that makes things even harder, so feel free to try this game out as well. It's both for hardcore and more casual players now. The only complaint I imagine people might have about this is that you can still unlock achievements and progress through the game's unlock system even on Angel mode, but if you are mad people are getting PNGs for slightly less effort than you, then I don't know, take this up with the developers, I guess. I don't want to start a fight here, but I honestly just don't care about that, and I can't fight your battles for you. Luckily, the developers seem to really enjoy implementing this system into the game, and I saw no complaints among the comments on Steam on the date I checked the update on, so it seems everyone is happy about difficulty in games for once. This once. Enjoy it, it won't last. Well, that's it for One Step from Eden. I don't need to give a final conclusion because I just spent the last however many minutes this video is long praising it. If you need any final comments, then well, hello, I'm Penguin Overdrive. I absolutely despise roguelites with all of my heart, to the point I wish I could just mass ignore all roguelites on Steam instantly. I don't know if there's a way to just ban a tag from existence, but I really wish I could just ban roguelites from my eyes at the very least. But hey, I loved One Step from Eden, and it's definitely one of my favorite games of 2020, and if that doesn't tell you something about this game, then I don't know what will. See you guys next time.